And from what I see a lot of people getting into homeschooling or getting into doing some enrichment for their children after school or on the weekends or in the summer, and they're having a hard time figuring out, where do I fit into all this? Because if you belong to one group, then everybody in the group will tell you, well, that's not Waldorf enough. Or if you belong to another group, everybody will say, well, that's not Christian enough. You know, or you belong to another group, and they're like, well, you're not really homeschooling because your kids don't do full-time. And so what I'm looking for is a place where people can go, because I think a lot of people end up feeling two things. They end up feeling defeated, you know, when they first start out, or even in the middle of it. They feel like, you know, I'm just not fitting in. You know? And so what I'm looking for is a place that people can come and feel that they have a philosophy, you know, something that they're aiming for in their mind. They can set out this philosophy of what we're doing, but they can feel like they do fit in somewhere. And they can bring all these philosophies from Waldorf, they can bring in a little of this, they can bring in that, they can do it full-time or part-time. I think it can represent more for us than when you say homeschooling. It really just specifically addresses one type of person. And if you say EarthSchooling, it can address so many more types of people. And EarthSchooling itself, this is what it means to me. And this pretty much encompasses what it means to me. And it's a way that I give the schooling of my children direction. And when I say schooling, I don't, and I'll get into this in the second one. But first of all, EarthSchooling means your environment. And that's pretty obvious in the name itself. That if you're saying the word EarthSchooling, that you're going to be focused in some way on your environment. And your environment not meaning, okay, we're going to go out and recycle and this and that and some sort of program on the environment that you're doing. I mean integrating the environment into your school. So when you think of the school, you think of your school and how you're teaching your children. And it doesn't matter if you're homeschooling full-time or part-time, or if your children are going to school itself and you're at home or work or whatever. What matters is that you think of your children's school as the environment, as the earth. And so, you know, the food that you eat is from the environment. You are, you know, some of the crafts you do are for the environment. Some of the clothes you wear are from the environment. Your studies bring in the environment as a natural part of your studies. And so it doesn't matter, like I said, where your children are being schooled at this time or that time. It's in your mind, it's in their bodies as much as possible. And this is an important one. The second one is attitude. And this is what brings in a lot more people into EarthSchooling than into homeschooling. Because and this is where this idea comes from, is just from my experience, from my family. It's the attitude that makes us homeschoolers. It's the attitude that makes us schooling in our home. It's the attitude that makes us schooling in the earth. It's not what we do all the time as a stereotype. So for instance, it's not a chart. It doesn't mean that I have a chart of this that says I'm a this schooler. It doesn't mean that my children are going to school every year. It doesn't mean they're homeschooling every year. In my child's life, they've attended a Waldorf school for 2 years. They attended an international school for 2 years. They were homeschooled for 3 years, and that was not 3 years in a row. And then we had, right now they're at a Montessori school. You know, it may seem very spread out, you know, how did I integrate all this? And it actually was very integrative, because what held us together was our attitude that the schooling is always in our heart. And the schooling and the learning takes place in our own inner beings and in our family and in ourselves. And the children have been instilled with this idea that learning never stops. It's in the air. You know, it is part of life. It's not something where you go to school for 5 hours and you learn, or you go to this place and you learn, or you have a homeschooling, okay, we're going to do our homeschooling today for 2 hours, and then you don't. You know, I've tried to integrate into them that learning is in everything. And the third thing about EarthSchooling is a rhythm. That a lot of people think that there's a certain way, you have to choose a certain way to homeschool, or you have to choose a certain method to do this, or a certain method to do that. And then you choose that when the child's born, and you follow it through until they're 18 or something. And I found out in our life that you can do that, and that works for some people, and that you can do that in some ways, but what happens is life happens. And so you may travel, and then everything you planned so perfectly that was so ideal at that time may suddenly not work. Or perhaps, like in my case, there was 1 year of our life where I was in the middle of a bunch of chaotic things that were going on in my life, and I was in the middle of homeschooling, and suddenly I couldn't homeschool anymore full-time. Your rhythmic is following the rhythm, having a structure, having an idea, like I said, but also following the rhythm of what life is bringing you. Is there an illness? Is there traveling? Is there something else going on? Is there some way that you need to reintegrate and replan what you're doing? And then this is something that's transcending the fourth part. It's something that's going everywhere. So one problem I have with the word homeschooling is it has home in it. And I think anywhere that I am staying at the moment is home. We're travelers. I think by seeing our classroom, not just, oh, we're doing some schooling at home and then we're going to take a field trip. I think sometimes even as homeschoolers, people get that idea that we're schooling at home and then we're going to do a field trip. But not even using those two words. Trying to open up your mind and envision everything as your classroom. And then the last part of it is it's very holistic. And so a lot of problems that a lot of weaknesses of some school systems or some schooling methods will be that they're not so holistic. With the Waldorf method, you're looking at the head and the heart and the hands. You're putting this whole person, and a lot of rote writing, a lot of reading passages, doing worksheets, and that's really a lot in the head. But the reality of it. And so I think that our job as EarthSchoolers is to balance out what's happening to us. So if you have a situation where your children are learning a lot of mental work, then you need to balance that out with the spiritual, emotional, and physical.